So it had been asked before about, what makes my show tick. So I decided I'll make a video, kind of a walkthrough of the property, and well, not the whole property, but just where the controllers are. If you saw the show, you already kind of know what the layout's like, and how many lights and everything, where I have it all. So yeah, let's go outside and show you how it all works. Alright, let's start with the controllers. This is a bud box I got from Amazon. I don't remember the exact model, but I know it was in the warehouse. And I paid about $50, maybe less. But I wanted the clear outside so I can see what's going on with the status lights and voltages from the outside without having to open it up. All X-Connect for the outputs, or the outputs. And just waterproof power, and all the glands to keep everything waterproof except for this last one. This was kind of an afterthought for the DMX, but inside, F16 V3. I'm not using all the ports, but I did something a little interesting here that I haven't seen anybody do, and I was kind of worried if it was going to work or not, and I just did it, and it ended up working out. But the way I wired this was the board gets its power from V2 here, and this is going to one power supply. There's 4 power supplies in here, and the other voltage input powers half the board, and this one powers the other half, plus the actual controller itself. So because I like to model chain, I was quickly using up all the whatever the power supply was able to handle. So these power supplies are 12 volt, 350 watts, it's about 30 amps, and you can only get about 1,000 pixels on them, and I'm using about 500 on one, and I've got another one. They're about 500 a piece for each run, so I would only be able to get maybe 2,000 pixels just off this board. So I wanted to maximize kind of what each port could handle, and so the way I wired it was, let's say like this one, it's getting its power, data, and ground from the board, and these are all running from the board. But if you look at these here, it's only getting its ground and data. The power is actually being ran from another power supply. So I divided up into 4s. So these 4, one power supply, these 4 are another power supply, and so on and so forth. That way each 4 can handle about 1,000, maybe a little more pixels per. So I've got 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 out of all this. I was worried that I was going to have issues with the data, being that the data is coming from the voltage on the board, but the power that's going to the pixels is coming from a completely separate power supply. But it all ended up working. I've got it all sectioned up here. Ports 1 through 4. There's V2 and V1, which are the ports here and there. And then 9 through 12. And then 2 of them in the back here. I've got 2 distribution boards for power, and that's just for power injection. And then I've got one expansion board coming out to here, and I've got 4 other differential receiver boards that are all plugged in right here. 2 of them are with Cat 6. The other 2 are at Cat 5e. I felt like I was wasting money buying this direct burial Cat 6 when I can get Cat 5e for, probably more than half the price. And this is just real overkill for this application. The data doesn't need to be that high from what I've read. And I've got 2 DMX outputs. Only one of them's being used. I never got around to wiring the other one. and that's just going into this Ethernet to DMX plug here. Let's see, and right above that I got my high voltage stuff. This is the Pixel 2 things, and this thing's really cool the way this works. So I've got my WS2811 coming in, and the way he's managed to wire this up was, or to program it, is it takes the data from the lights and it splits up the channels. So you've got red, blue, green, that's 1, red, blue, green, that's 2, red, blue, green, and that's 3. So to turn this on and off, all I have to do is program it to turn on red at whatever percentage. I've got the switch here for dimming, that's turned off. Probably shouldn't be touching that either. This is high voltage, so that's 110 coming in here. And then if I had something else plugged into here that's just AC, so it could be lights. Right now I've got that wired into the snow machine. So the way I would trigger the snow machine is in the sequencer, just have it set to turn red on for whatever amount of time, and that turns on the snow machine for that duration of time. And I had plans to add more, but I just never got around to it. But this is a really cool board. This basically allows you to turn anything on or sequence it with whatever I want in the show. So I've got a lot of plans for this in the future, and I've got the DC board too, and I want to do some stuff with servos, maybe some talking, moving faces. I wasn't quite sure how to do the DMX, but that would have been helpful instead of having to run straight from the main board downstairs. That's what's in there. Shut this. Oh, I guess I should have mentioned, I don't have any fans inside this enclosure besides the fans that are in the power supplies, and they're stacked up with a bit of an air gap in between. I don't seem to be having an issue with temperature even during the summer, but I do have these bud vents that I put here on the side. I've got one down here too, and it doesn't get too hot in here, it seems like, and this fan and this fan aren't even on. I think the only reason why the fan in the back is on is because this is drawing 2 amps and that's drawing 2 amps, but the other two, these are just in standby, they're just sitting. It's not generating too much load, and I didn't feel I had to put a fan on this. And that tray that's in here that everything's mounted to, that's just plexiglass that was cut to fit this box. Nobody's making any kind of mounting plate that fits this size box. I don't remember what the dimensions are on it, but it's pretty big. And I've got room here for another expansion board. I want to do another 4 differential receivers for next year. And to the left here is my router, all my sound stuff, and my Falcon players in here. I went with the try to keep the Wi-Fi on the outside of the box, so I got these bulkheads here, but as you can see they're rusting, so that wasn't a good idea. I mean, it didn't cause any damage or anything, but still I think I need to go with something else or just remove it altogether. So in here the router, and this was just the Asus router I got from I believe Goodwill for $9. I think it retails for like 100, but I just had it laying around, so I figured I'd use that for my show network, keep my show network separate from my home network, because I do have something running multicast, and I know that will wreak havoc on my home network. I got the Falcon player here on a Raspberry Pi 3, I believe that is. I've got so many of them I forget. OLED display, just because I had it. Kind of an impulse buy. I'm using the Sound Blaster Play 3 for the audio. I was told it would give me some better quality versus the one that's on there. And that's splitting. One end is going into this amplifier that got really good reviews as far as the hardware that's inside here for the yard speakers. and then the other end is going to my FM transmitter. The FM transmitter was sitting here. That's what this cable's for. It's the extension for the antenna, which runs out the back and around here because the cable was too big, and then comes here to a bulkhead, which was on the outside. And one of the things I did not account for was the fact that that thing interferes with everything. The minute I turned on the transmitter, it would freeze up all the ArtNet data that was coming out of the Pi player, and my controller would lock up. So I had to take it out. I had to put it as far away as possible. It's just a mess. I don't know if it's the shielding or what I can do to put that someplace else, but I had to move it away from all the electronics. Just kept interfering with it. So the Falcon player is outputting to the router, and the router, I've got more glands coming out to here, and this is going out to one's going to this box to control the F16. I got another one that's going out to the garage, and that's powering a BeagleBone Black that's running my P5 panels. And underneath all that was just this power distribution that is just an impulse buy. It was at Ace Hardware, I think, on sale. I mean, I don't really use it for what it was intended for. It has a little remote and a sensor right here, so I can remotely turn it off. It's got timer settings and all that other stuff. I needed a power distribution of some sort, and power strip would have worked just fine, but for the price, it was about the same. And that's running the Falcon player, the Raspberry Pi, because that's 2.4 amps, which I believe these need about 3 or 4 amps to run properly. And the red light's still on, which they say that's an indication of a voltage drop. Doesn't seem to be a problem here. I know with my 3D printer, if that red light was on, I was likely to have a failed print halfway through. Haven't had any issues with this. The only issues I was having was with the FM transmitter, and you know, I've got the heat sinks on there to see if that kind of mitigates something. No issues in here. I don't have any kind of venting or anything, and I know this thing gets pretty hot. All the heat that comes off the back of this, everything in here does get a little warm during the day, but no issues so far. These are GE Z-Wave outdoor plugs. I have one on the Falcon controller. That way I can remotely power cycle everything, because every once in a while that thing would lock up, especially after the last couple updates. And then I've got another one to control the FM transmitter and the yard speakers if I need to kill the audio for whatever reason. And I've had somebody ask about this thing being out here in the elements with the rain, the water, and it's never been an issue. It's not only is it sitting underneath this box, but you can see I'm kind of underneath the eaves, and with typically the way the wind blows this way, so the garage, the wall here stops the wind from blowing the rain this way. I mean, it gets a little water on the backside, but it never really, I haven't had an issue, and this has all stayed pretty dry for the most part. We've had some pretty decent rainstorms. So that's about it on that. Kind of ashamed of this one, but I ran out of plugs over here, so my fan right here, that's what's running the power to the fog machine and my smoke machine. And it does draw some amps, and I've had to move this. This will trip my GFCI in the garage, so I've had to run it straight from an outlet that's at the bottom of the breaker box, and that seemed to fix that issue. So yeah, that's about that. Almost certain I'm forgetting something, but I'll close that up. And let's see, up top, that's the smoke machine. A little bit of an overkill for what I've done. I've had somebody ask about the air gap on that, and I don't know if you can see that, but there is those little holes around the outside, and that seems to be just enough of an air gap that it sucks in air, and it's not an issue. The issue I do have is this thing is too powerful. and that runs across and sweeps over all the way across there. I've got holes drilled, and I think that's just a drain pipe for RVs, so it holds up with the heat. The reason why I went with the conduit here, or the PVC I should say, is that smoke machine is too hot, and it started melting anything I put on it. It's the Foggy's snow machine. Decent little machine. With the times I trigger this thing, it will last me about, I think, half for one full show on a weekend. So that's about from 6 to midnight. No issues. I took the advice of somebody and I put a fan on the underside of it, so when it does shoot out, the fan disperses it a little more. And yeah, as far as fluid for those, I will not be using this again next year. It's just that long lasting is an understatement. I will have a segment that has maybe a I want to say a 3-second burst, and it dissipates from the house, but when you look down the street you can see the fog lingering underneath the street lights further down. And on days I'm not home, I don't even run it because it's too much and it lingers too long. I don't want the fire department called and show up and I'm not home. And the snowflake, I just went with the extra dry because they said this stuff lingers around for a while, and it looks real. It's really convincing. Somebody had asked about residue on other places I've looked, and this thing was spraying all over my car for hours, and it left little soap spots, but those soap spots went away after a while. It just seemed like it was soap. Wasn't an issue. Didn't leave any stains. I've got no stains or marks on the driveway or any of the electrical or so. But this is all I've ever used. I don't have any experience with anything else, so I don't know really if this is any better or worse than anything. So that's that. I feel like I'm missing something here. So now that I think I have everything covered here, let's move over to some of the differential expansions. So I've got two. There's one, a Cat 6, Cat 5e, runs under here. Across, and this one's disconnected just because I'm tearing down. I didn't want to run it if I didn't need to. And inside of here I've got two power supplies. Oh, some of these Cat 6 jumpers, and they're going into two of these J-board 4-port differential receivers. So it takes the pixel data for 4 ports and splits it up into 4 more. All off of just the single network cable gets me 4 ports. So that's come in real handy, especially in a place like this. I don't have to run all that pixel data from the main controller. I can just run everything, wire everything just into these, and not have to worry about bringing anything over to this spot besides those network cables. And then I've got my power. I've kind of almost everywhere I've used these. These are from Walmart. It's just the 3-core extension cords. I buy them by the 100 feet, and it's about $20, and they're outdoor rated, 16 gauge, and I've had 0 problems with these. They don't seem to be twisted enough to make any kind of interference with the pixel data. And I've had more issues with this monoprice stuff, which is right here. This stuff is just too rigid. The casing on the outside, this is supposed to be direct burial. I believe this is the 4-core. Even I've used 16, 18, and I don't like it. It's too rough, too rigid. It just bends, and it's really hard to work with. This stuff is real soft and supple, pliable, and I've not had any issues with it. I've had more issues with these where I'm just having an issue with pixel run, and I just replace the cable with something else, and that fixes it. So I won't be using this stuff anymore. I think I'm just going to continue buying this. It's just convenient. When I ran out of this, I had to wait for Amazon to deliver more, and depending what warehouse it was, and the closer I got to Christmas, it just became an issue. This stuff, I run out, I just run over to Walmart, grab another 100 feet, and I use it. And it's handy because now I have plugs for my power supplies, and you know, I snip those off. I've got you know, the length I need for whatever power cable I need for the power supplies, so that's one less splice. And then all the cable in between I just use for extension cords and pixel data. So that's like this one right here. This one's going into another X connect, and that's going out to wherever I need it to go. So real handy. I like this stuff. I think I may use more. Let's move on to, oh, well, before we go over there, this is pretty handy from the builder. So when they typically build houses, the first thing they put up is the electrical box, and they added outlet under panel left and right, both sides. And yeah, I have this one off just because. And these right here, left and right, they're on their own independent breaker. And some cities have ordinance where they make them remove these before they complete the house. But here there was nothing saying they had to remove it, so they left it here, and I'm very grateful for that. That way, if I do blow a breaker on this or that, and they've got GFCIs on them, which is awesome. I'm not putting the whole show down, which has happened. I've had my softener trip the breaker in the garage, and that completely blacks out my whole show. So at least with this, if I do have a short during the rain, or if a power supply fails, it's not going to knock the entire show out. It will just knock whatever portion that's attached to it. So I've got two different areas, and they're both, I believe they're 20 amp breakers. Yeah, 20. So 20 and 20, instead of putting all that load on just one 20, I've got two independent 20s, and this is awesome. Really grateful for that. Let's go check out the tree. Coming out toward the tree, these are my landscape speakers that I got from Amazon. They're waterproof, so they've held up. They've sat in some pretty decent rains where water's pulled up in them. There was some crackling, but I'm not sure if that is coming from these, the amplifier, or the Pi. I haven't had time to troubleshoot. I just didn't care. I don't think anybody else noticed but me, and it irritated me, just like a lot of my other flaws in the show. Nobody else knows it but me, and I only want to look into it just for my own sake. But the sound quality was great. These things are awesome. They're a little too loud. I have them really, really low because they echo on quiet nights. So this is the control box for my Megatree. So I had the original plan of having the amp meter on the outside, and as you can see, this is terrible. This is a bad idea. My original plan was to silicone this in, and I was going to make a small piece of plexiglass to go over the outside, because there's a button here that you're supposed to set for the alarms, and that would seal it all in, make it waterproof. We'd had a dry season. I just threw this out here, and we didn't have any rain. Then the big rainstorm came. I threw a bag over this real quick, and that bag blew off while I was at work, and as you can see, this doesn't work anymore. It started fading, and then it just went. So completely my fault. And that's all plugged in. I forgot to mention on the other one, but I've got shunts running on everything, just to be safe. I wasn't sure what the current levels I was going to be pulling from these. And two bulkheads, the Cat 5e coming in here, and this one I never used. This is the Falcon differential receiver board. I was originally going to go with all these, and there's a loud truck coming by. All right, he's gone. So I was originally gonna go with all these, but the price versus Jeremy's boards, it's not worth the extra money. I mean, these things have a clock output on them, which I'm not using, and the problem I had was when you're plugging these things in, it's a 4-pin, and I'm only using 3-pin. So what has happened is I went to go plug in my 4-pin and it wasn't straight. I put it in off center and plugged in just the last 3 and shorted it out. So with these, it's simple. It's 3, only 3 go in. There's no way to accidentally plug it in wrong. And I've burnt out fuses and something else I burnt out. I forgot what it was, but that was here first, and I just added this one in. The plan was to use both, and I ended up not needing it, so it's just kind of sitting there. I don't think I will be buying any more. Hopefully Jeremy makes more of these things. I can get more of them. But same thing with all my... Oh, that's the other thing that's awesome about these is underneath here he's got power injection ports, so I can power inject straight from the board rather than these. There's no power ports on them, and I don't have to worry about getting a separate board just for power distribution. So for my tree here, I'm running 16 strings, and they're about 57. Yeah, they're 57 per string, and there's 2 strands. So there's one right there, and that zigzags all the way up until right there. That's the last one. And then I'm power injecting at the end, and then that's string 2, and then I've got the 3rd port is running up to my star, and this is the ASAP Junior pole, by the way. I went with the steel cable versus the strap. And then the last one is just had the extra port, so I figured why not. I ran a snowflake over there, and you can see my Walmart cable here. Stuff is awesome. No issues with it. I love it. As compared to the mono price, I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be like this, but this stuff is already fading just from UV damage. It's kind of a gray now, and these things were jet black when I first got them. Whereas this Walmart stuff, I mean, one of these cables is over a year old and the other is brand new, and you can't tell the difference. It's been sitting out here in the sun for a couple months, and they're still soft and pliable and a lot more forgiving than this stuff. I mean, look at that shape. That's just stuck like that until you bend it where it needs to go. And yeah, I just fear that it's going to bend and break this casing because it's real rigid. I don't like it. I won't be using it again. And this mess right here is from when I first did this tree. I power injected every other string before I knew any better. And I come to find out from testing that running everything at 20%, that was just completely unnecessary. So I've got all these extra cables. I cut them, and they're just sitting there. I'm only power injecting at the end. That seems to be pretty adequate for what I'm doing here. That is that. And this is my P10 Tune 2 sign, which I made using I think that's 4-inch PVC, and these are glass globes from Home Depot, and I've got some LEDs inside of there. I put this little waterproof, I think these are meant for boat shore charging ports, so you can plug it in and run that to your inverter to charge or run your boat. It just seemed like a nice touch, make it convenient, so I can unplug this, and this whole thing's self-contained, and then when I put it where I need to, just all it needs is power, and that's it. I had the splitter here because I had a power something else, just kind of an afterthought, which ended up causing issues with the breaker tripping. It was a bad idea. So I made this mistake. I was in such a rush to get this done that I put a vent here because inside of here there is a 5-volt power supply, meanwhile, and there's also a Raspberry Pi 3 and a Pixel stick. The Pixel stick is running the strips that are in here, and that is the one thing that I have that's multicast. I could not get the unicast to work, so I just ran it multicast. Both are being controlled by Wi-Fi. The mistake I made here was I did not make any access to this. I sealed it up, and this is all silicone, so it's all waterproof, which is great, but that SD card that's in here is corrupt. And I say corrupt in the fact that it still works, but the files that are on it, I can't put anything else on it, and I can't do anything with it. I can't SSH into it. The only thing I can do is run it. So thankfully I had a sequence on there that just said the Tune 2 information, and I'm still able to get into the Pi, and I'm able to change that and turn it on, turn it off. But if I try to incorporate this display into a sequence, I can't upload any new FSCQ files, so I figured I'd just deal with it. I didn't have the time to take it apart during the season, and that's on my list of things to change for next year. This thing needs an access. I don't even know if I'll use it again. I mean, it worked fine. I didn't seal up the bottom here. It's kind of a bonehead move. It worked fine for what I needed, but you know, looking back at it, I really wish this was a lot bigger. This was just kind of buried in the back and didn't work out too well. So, oh, and that's also the there's a couple lines here that are, I believe the blue channel is dead on them. So there's just some lines you can see. I mean, you can't see, I can see, and it bothers me, which is more than I need to get rid of this thing. And I made the mistake of not buying extra panels, so if I do replace just this panel, the color's going to be off. So this is no good. Lessons learned. Let's see. I got asked about these in the front of the house. Let me back up here. These are my P5 panels. There is 6. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. 9. 9 in each one. They're in a vertical orientation, and they're all running off of a BeagleBone Black. Those are P5s. And that's about it. I think that's everything. Let me switch up here, because I'm just now realizing I'm making the one cardinal sin of recording video. And I'm in portrait mode, not landscape. So, yeah, let me switch. Alright, so that was my 2019 display setup. I'm just now realizing that I was filming in portrait mode, so you know, holding the camera upright, it always leads to those black bars on the side. You know, for those you don't understand, it's recording like this and not like this. So I'm not gonna go back and refilm all that. I gotta take everything down. It's been a great season. My first year, so a lot of lessons learned. This is kind of where I sit when I'm sequencing. Oh, well, I guess not sequencing, but importing, modeling, and figuring all the wiring out, getting my network set up. This is kind of the way my setup looks. I've got my laptop. This has got an i7 in it, and external monitor. Everybody kept talking about using an external monitor, and it's not until I made my first sequence that I realized how invaluable that is. There's just not enough space on the sequencer here, which is essentially like Photoshop, but for lighting. And there's just too many controls, too many things to click on, and you want to have a nice big display of what the house looks like and what the model you're trying to put the effect on looks like, and just having it in that tiny little box in the corner just doesn't work. Trying to use that monitor, and this is a 15-inch monitor that I have on my laptop, and it's still not enough. Just not enough room. It gets too cluttered, and you can't see really. It's just kind of small areas. So I've learned a lot, met a lot of great people in this community, especially so you got Light Up Arizona, which is the Facebook page or a Facebook group, but I met them through the X-Lights Facebook group. They're great, knowledgeable people. This time of year, I mean, toward the end of the season, the page just got busy with everybody trying to fix their problems. So I just looked at what everybody else did, how they solved their problems, and researched. A lot of people don't use that search function, but I mean, I'm not the smartest guy. I don't really have any experience with any of this, and I was able to figure it all out by just looking through other people who had similar situations and traveling around and looking at other people's displays. I've had a lot of people come and visit my display, and real grateful for some of the friends I've made, and I look forward to doing bigger and better next year. Come check it out. Got a lot of great ideas, especially with some of the new stuff that's coming out, so should be fun. Anyway, any questions, feel free to ask. Now that the season's over, I want to start getting back into the home automation side of things and maybe getting some more videos out and being a little more active. This is just real stressful trying to get all this stuff up and problems I'm running into and fixing things. So here's to next year.